There we are. I think we are we live? We're live. All right. So hello everyone out there. Let's see. We are short a couple guys right now. Hopefully they'll show up. Jason and Cullen, if you're out there, please join us. But otherwise, it's Fred and I, and most of you have probably seen us already at some point before, but we'll do a quick introduction again, just in case you haven't. Fred, would you please?
Yes, I am Fred Sickley. I'm hanging out here in Switzerland. It is evening time here. I'm getting ready to tear into a guerrilla film next week. Like I always say, every week I will eventually make one. So,
Right on. And hey, everybody, my name is Clark. I'm out here in Orange County in California. It is 10 a.m. on a cloudy, gray Sunday morning, and I'm happy to be here with Fred. And so this is week 7 of the intensive, and we'll kind of just jump right in here. So we're going to be covering lessons 24 through 26. 26 is a postscript, so it's really lessons 24, 25. And and then we're going to spend some time discussing Cullen's short film that he made for the intensive. So we'll dive right in. So the first lesson is, or the first lesson we'll cover is on career strategy. And wow, I mean, there's a lot we could really discuss in all this stuff. It's kind of it's there's a lot of topics that people will probably be really interested to talk about. But we'll kind of go through this document here. And so in lesson 24, uh, Werner talks about short films. He talks about different platforms, specifically, platform of the internet to share those short films. Um, and before we get into this smaller question of what do we think makes some short films go viral, kind of just talking about some of the changes in general that have happened in the industry. That technology has, on one hand, made it quite a bit easier and less expensive for people to make films. Um, doesn't mean people make better films, but at least it's easier to make a film, or it's less expensive to make a film, and it's much easier to distribute it, at least in the sense to make it available for somebody to watch. Doesn't again mean people will watch it just because you put it up online. But what do we think, Fred? What do you think about over the past 10 years or so, roughly 10, 15 years, this change in technology? How do you think that can be kind of some pros and some cons for us aspiring filmmakers?
well, we were talking about this before we went live about how I don't think you mentioned the idea of coming up with an idea hasn't altered itself that much in terms of filmmaking in maybe 100 years. Like you have to, I mean, maybe it's a little different because you can, a lot of people, myself included, will try to write things that they think they can make. And I
Yeah,
think I can make things that I didn't think I could make 15 years ago. And we talked about this in terms of Cullen's movie. Like if Cullen was going to try to make that movie 30 years ago in the 80s, his short film would have taken a bigger, much broader crew, even just to do the opening credit sequence would have taken more people and to get the coloring right.
yeah.
I think that you know the fact that things are technically more accessible, more available, maybe makes it easier to make something viral, but you still need that idea there. And without that idea, you know, things. I mean, I guess things that don't have great ideas behind them become popular, but it's ends up being the same kind of thing.
Well, it can. I think, I think maybe I am an idealist, or maybe I delude myself a little bit into thinking this, but I really do feel like at the end of the day, the idea, the story that you're telling trumps everything.
Yeah.
God, now I like hate to use that term anymore because of our current. Anyway, but not to turn this into a political discussion, but I feel like if the story, and Werner talks about this at a couple points, during the lessons, that the story that the idea that your story really can overcome everything. So yeah, I mean, I think in a way, we're in a time and place where technology exists. It makes it easier for us to tell stories, to make films. But you still got to have that idea. And then your point is true. You know, okay, well, what makes this question here? Well, what makes something go viral? I don't know if that's a goal. You know, I guess you could ask the question, well, is that even a worthwhile goal too? I think that at the end of the day, I don't know that you can manipulate that. I don't think you can control that. I don't think that you can create a film trying to work backwards from that. Okay, I want to, I've seen people do this. I have certainly been a witness to other filmmakers trying to work backwards from, I want to make something go, I want something to go viral. I want a lot of people to see this. They watch all these different videos that have already gone viral. They try to learn from them. They try to reverse engineer them. And then they try to create something I've not seen it work. I also think that that's just like the worst way to make a film, and that's just horrible. I feel like you're not a filmmaker. This is me kind of soapbox, but if you do that, you're not a filmmaker. You're a marketer.
Well, but he's also talking about shorts too.
Yeah.
He mentions in, I think, 24. He says that a short, your crazy kitten video shouldn't be longer than a minute, and that's what he's talking about when he talks about that. And I think that's what this question is about too. What goes viral? If somebody sees somebody dance silly on YouTube, they think, you know what, screw that, because I can dance really silly. And that's why we get this viral video, this girl twerking on a door or something, or we get this.
And those aren't films, and we know those aren't films. There's a difference between.
But if you saw those films in 1985, you would have laughed your balls off, man. You'd have been like, "Holy cow! Did you see this thing?"
Well, actually, you raise an interesting point. I say those aren't films. Go back even further than 1985. Go back to the beginning of film, where that's actually what films were. Where somebody just put a camera on sticks, and for 5 minutes somebody danced or walked goofy or juggled or did,
or
it's right. No, it's interesting that you're right. That's a really good point, Fred. That's actually how film started.
Yeah, that's why we're still fascinated with it.
And it's so interesting. You're right that in a weird way, now with YouTube and things like this, we've almost, in a certain way, gone back to the very beginning of what film was before D.W. Griffith and the creation of a grammar of film and editing, juxtaposition of images to create a new story. You're right.
Yeah,
that's a really interesting
line up, and they'd go into a little room and they would watch. It was just a video of a train pulling into the.
And people were just blown away. Yeah.
Well, it is now, where you could sit here and you could watch a train pull into the station on your computer, and you're excited by it because you're not at the train station watching the train come in. You're actually watching a train that came into a different station that's maybe not even in your locale. And that's, I think, part of what YouTube is about. Like I mentioned, the girl twerking or the idiot singing or doing his dance or whatever it is. It's exciting to see what somebody in Arkansas or North Carolina or New York is doing in their living room, because it's not my living room.
No, I think so.
That's what makes that exciting, maybe.
And I'm going to add to that a little bit of, I think, so what do you think makes some short films go viral? I'm interested, neither of us, I don't know if people out there know this, but neither of us made up these questions. They're good questions, but sometimes I'm curious about, the intent behind them sometimes, and I sometimes kind of change focus of what we talk about, just because, well, what the hell, we can while we're up here doing this. But I think there's honesty. I think an honesty of intent. I personally think is important. Again, I said, when you see videos that are clearly contrived to try to go viral, I think those rarely do. So I think an honesty of intent. And you said, people like to see somebody else's reality or what's going on, here or there. It's like, well, a cat video. Well, that's that's just. There's honesty still, even in a cat video, right?
And it's exciting because it's not your cat, too.
That's what I mean. So yeah, I think, and a lot of times, it's the hook into a zeitgeist. So what makes a short film go viral? Sometimes you get lucky and something kind of hooks into a certain zeitgeist or kind of catches the wave of something that's going on in the world at the moment. But I think it's a really hard thing to, because in my other life, I worked in marketing and advertising for almost a decade before I focused on this full time. And that's like everybody's trying to reverse engineer, trying to dissect and break down, because that's like a marketer's wet dream, is to figure out, how do I make something go viral? And the reality is that even with millions of dollars of budgets and people breaking everything down here and there, and just like scientists studying it, people still can't make it happen on command.
Well,
you just can't. So
I think Herzog talks about this in 25 too. He talks about how he likes to sit in a theater. He said nothing beats being in a theater where you have people next to you, you have somebody in front of you, you have somebody behind you, and you have this collective experience. Something happened actually just today. My wife showed me a video of a dude dressed up as his dog's favorite toy and came in.
Gumby.
Yes, the Gumby video. Well, that friggin' video, man, like, everybody's entertained by that video.
Sure.
Like, I'm sitting here thinking, like, yeah, okay, it's cute, and there's a dog. Something, my answer, I guess, to this is that everybody likes to be entertained, and they also like to feel like they're in on the joke. And so if you're going to laugh at the Gumby video, my wife's going to laugh at the Gumby video, I can laugh at the Gumby video, and I can think like, holy cow, look at us as a world, we can laugh at the Gumby video together.
Yeah.
It's not just honesty, it's also like, hey, everybody knows that's like clever, and they know kind of why it's clever as soon as you start to overthink it. Like I overthink a lot of things. Like, it's fun to watch.
Well, there's a purity to that. And I guess that's what I mean by honesty, is there was a purity to that. It was, there's a purity to it, and we all relate to it. We all, and I think that, and it would cross any kind of language barrier, any kind of, right? I mean, there's no cultural barrier to that, really.
It's not that it's Gumby that's funny. It's that it's the dog, and it's a grown-up size of its toy.
And the dog's just going crazy. Yeah, I agree. So I guess there's some. I'm gonna, again, I'll get on a soapbox, and instead of just this is all just our opinion anyway, I would just say, I think maybe don't try to spend your time trying to make something go viral, but to tell a story from your heart, something that you're passionate about. And I think that the more you can get to the center of your own heart, the more you'll tell a story that has a better chance of getting to the center of someone else's heart. And when people can relate to something, and whether it's humorously, whether it's laughing or crying or whatever it is, then I think the better the chance it has that people will want to see it. So there's my 2 cents on that.
Like I said before we went live too. Like, I watched 3 movies today with my wife. We watched 3 movies, and there was this one that I was like, well, that's really entertaining, and it's a good thing that there was enough money to make everybody entertained by this movie. Like, it was it had a lot of funny points to it, but that's not like why I watch a lot of movies. I don't watch movies because I don't have anything else to laugh at. Like, if I want to laugh, apparently I can go on my news feed and find a Gumby video to laugh at.
Yeah.
But, people make cinema because they think that somebody's going to buy it, because money's involved. If something's not going to be popular, then it's not going to bring in enough money to make the money back to give it to the people to go make more money. Like that, the same thing that makes like you said, as an advertising thing, the same thing that makes a YouTube video go viral is what the studio executives are trying to find to throw money at.
Sure.
And so it's they see that sometimes it's enough to have a video of the train pull into the station, but that's not going to be enough for everybody. I think it extends itself beyond the old medium and the new medium and cinema too. Like, I don't know.
Well, no, it's interesting. I said, I wish we were like, on A of the first point here. We're like 20 minutes into it, but we're certainly like won't be able to discuss like every aspect of everything that of every point. But we'll kind of have to move on a little bit to make sure we touch on all these points. Then we still have Cullen's film to talk about here at the end. So, So, one of the other things that Werner talks about in lesson 24 is uh, rejection, basically, or being booed. He talks about specifically being booed and spat on, um, but still maintaining his love and passion for his work and for what he's doing. And, so clearly rejection and failure are things that, as any creative person, filmmaker, whatever, I mean, you have to deal with. I'll go out on a limb and say a lot more than most people in their life, by orders of magnitude. So how do we deal with that? Fred, your thoughts on that? How do you deal with rejection and failure?
I think it depends. Like I'm actually going through that right now too, and I think that it depends on what type of rejection or what type of failure it is too.
Yeah.
I just kind of quit making my final, because if I was going to put my final out, I'd want to call it, like directed by Alan Smithy. Do you guys know? Do you know Alan
Yeah,
Smithy?
yeah. Yep, that's that's kind of like the catch-all for a director who decides that, for whatever reason, I'm not going to have my name on this film. And Alan Smithy is like I forget the technical. I don't know if that where the origins of that, but yeah, it's like the director didn't want his name on it, and so they took it off, and Alan Smithy is the name you put on it.
And to me, Alan Smithy represents an artistic failure that the director saw. And
Mm.
okay, the studio still said they were going to put that money into putting that film out, and people were going to go see it. And a couple of times, an Alan Smithy film was shown, and Roger Ebert was like, "Yeah, that was really interesting from this unknown director, Alan Smithy," where the director didn't even care about it. To that director, that was an artistic failure and maybe a personal failure. So I mean, it's different when it's a professional failure. It's different when you stick your neck all the way out and say, "Hey, look at this thing. I think that it failed or it succeeded for me personally and artistically," and then somebody else throws it back in your face and tells you it's a piece of garbage. Herzog talks about showing some of his films and having people, he talked about that executive saying like, "Where's the bathroom? Because I have to look it all up because this movie was so bad."
Yeah.
Like that's a professional rejection. That's not a personal rejection, I think, maybe.
Yeah.
Or at least Herzog, I think that was one of the things he mentioned too, is that he tries not to take those professional failures as personal failures.
Yeah.
And maybe not even artistic. He says his key is to make a film that, he doesn't use these words, but he says make a film that's bulletproof. If you make a film that's bulletproof, then where did you fail? If you only failed professionally, then yeah, get back on your horse and dust yourself off.
Yeah.
If you make a film that you hate, then I think that's a bigger, more personal failure, and how to deal with that is to try to make less crappy films, maybe,
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, and I think so. A couple interesting. I mean, I think the only way to make less crappy films is to make crappy films.
hmm
I mean, I think so. That's So in a way, it's like, okay, well, I mean, how we define failure, I think, is really important. I know for me, I mean, God, I have the past 10 years of my life, ever since I left my previous career, and I've been going down this path. I've had nothing but failure. 10 years of failure. But I'm a lot better at a lot of things than I was 10 years ago. But so I think defining failure, I think the language that we kind of use to think about ourselves and our work and our own mind, how we talk, that kind of dialogue that we have, I think it's really important. I think language is really key. And is something a failure if you've learned from it, and it helps, if it's a step to better work in the future, is that really a failure? So that I think is an important thing to kind of realize. Is
Yeah.
Is each independent film really what's important, or is it your progression and your journey as an artist, as a human being, as a filmmaker? What's really the key here? So I mean, I think that's kind of important. Yeah, I mean, Kitty is here saying, Van Gogh never sold a painting. So would we consider Van Gogh a failure as an artist? Maybe he was a failure at other things. I don't at sanity, no, but That's a joke. There's actually a dispute that he was insane, and I don't like to perpetuate the myth that creative people have to be insane. So there's my disclaimers on that. But
You don't?
um, I am on cold medicine, guys. Shit could get crazy, and I see Fred's drinking wine, and since it's just the two of us, we might just start getting wild up in here. You never know.
Yeah, this is a great place to talk about insanity, definitely.
Yeah. So I don't, so for me, because it's been a big journey for me to try to, and if I don't know how much time you got, Fred, maybe we'll just go over a little bit on some of this if you have more. And we started a little late, but,
Yeah.
Look, I started off pursuing acting primarily because and I think a lot of people do because when we're young and we watch films, you watch television, what do you see? You don't see the director, you don't see the writer, you see the actors. And so what I think people have a tendency a lot of times, you don't see the DP, you don't see the grip, you don't see the gap. You shouldn't, I guess. But if you do, there's bad quality control if you can see the grip or a gaffer or something in the film. But you know what I mean?
Or it's a behind the scenes.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So
that's what got me into filmmaking, was seeing behind the scenes
behind the
stuff.
scenes stuff.
I was
Okay,
like,
yeah.
man, that's awesome. He's the boss.
Yeah, so so I think a lot of people start as actors, but I did, and it was just like I had this idea that I was really focused on some kind of externally defined, kind of culturally defined vision of success. If I booked a role on XYZ, then that would be success. If I was a guest star or even at that point, even a co-star on a network or cable television show, that would be some kind of success. Or there was all these different. If I got an agent, if I got a manager, there was all these other, and it was really success was defined for me to a certain extent by a lot of these external parameters. And I think maybe for a lot of people that might be the case. I don't know if anybody else out there has felt that, where you've kind of been, and so I was propelled or motivated, I think, in my career by money in some cases, acceptance or appreciation in a lot of cases, to be honest, at that time. Um, and I think my journey failing so often going to, I mean, I've probably, I don't know, I kept track of every audition, but maybe close to 100 auditions. If you take everything from student films to commercials to TV shows to probably about 100, which is not that much actually. A buddy of mine had just went on his 500th audition, like last week. So it's not a lot, but I booked maybe like 10 things. I don't know. You do. I mean, maybe but that's a lot of rejection. That's a lot of, um, but it definitely forced me to kind of really take a look at how I define the word and what kind of success do I actually really want? Why am I really here? What really is the fuel that I put in my engine? Why am I doing this? So I don't know. I'm talking a lot here. It's a cold medicine, guys, but I took the daytime version, so it's filled with like Sudafed or something. I'm speeding out over here, tweaking. But anyway,
I gotta say that's why I quit. I had a revelation about acting. The last acting gig I had was that, like, I didn't want to act. I wanted to be an actor. And
yeah,
there's like a different thing there. I wanted
that's
that, like,
huge, Fred. That's
yeah,
huge. Great
I
way to
wanted
say
that.
that.
Yeah, I wanted to be able to go to the red carpet and put on a suit, put on a dog and get out there and be like, yeah, I'm an actor. I wanted to be an actor, but I didn't really want to act. And the last thing I did, I hated my role. I didn't have a lot of fun. It gave me a lot of personal constraints because I had to commute to get to the job and stuff like that. And then, dude, like a year later, I ended up directing a play for the same troupe, and it kind of hit me that, like, I didn't want to direct theater. I wanted to be a director, and that's a different thing. And that's kind of one of the things that led me to film. But talking about that play as whether it was a success or a failure, like, it was a financial failure. A lot of people involved in it had a whole lot of fun. So I think it was probably a success to them. But these were also, I'm talking about the people that essentially gave my vision the finger. And so to me as a director, like there were a couple of things in terms of like casting and set design that were wild successes about it.
Yeah.
And then there was my overall experience with it, which was like why I will never set foot in a theater in any kind of professional capacity unless you pay me a whole lot more. Like I don't need to be involved in that scene. I know how badly, like it could have turned out way worse, but to me, that play was a totally abysmal failure. It was the almost the worst artistic experience I've
But
ever
you
had.
did learn. But it helped you define what you don't want in the future, what you do, right? I mean, didn't it help
Yeah.
kind of steer you? It helped steer you, right?
Yeah, I did learn like the strength of being able to come up with a shorthand with your collaborators. Like if you can convey an idea just really efficiently with your collaborators and trust them to go off and create it the way that it's supposed to be created, or you can trust them to tell you what they need really efficiently and you can go do that. Like I learned that, but I mean, I also learned that I don't want to be involved in theater. You
Yeah.
know, to me, it made me feel like, I mean, it, it was, oh yeah, there was a couple of lessons learned, but it was a pretty big failure other than that.
Well, again, it sounds like to me that you learned a lot. And again, the way I kind of define it, I mean, maybe it's a defense mechanism, but the way I would define a failure is if, you make a mistake and you don't learn from it. That's a
Right.
failure. But making a mistake and learning from it, that's not a failure. And we're human beings. You cannot, I mean, like the root to any, I feel like mistakes are just inherent, absolutely necessary aspects of any creative process. And I feel like mistakes in work you make that work unique. There's no such thing as perfection. There's no such thing as perfect. No film Werner's ever done is even remotely close to perfect. No film anybody's ever done is even remotely close to perfect. And often it's those imperfections. It's that when an artist, when a filmmaker or whoever is, when what they're trying to convey is just slightly past their reach, that's when shit gets interesting to me.
Yeah, yeah.
And so if you're not making mistakes, if you're not failing, you're not pushing yourself. So, screw that, I don't know. I mean, that's my take on it.
You're right in terms of, especially in terms of adaptation and translation. Like a writer writes something on a page and then they get to a director to give it to actors, and what those actors do with it is different than what it came out of the on the paper as. Like and often some of the best things are, there's that whole list of shots that were totally improvised that made it into the final film,
Yeah.
and those are usually the best part.
Yeah.
And I'm actually working on a piece of art right now that is basically a series of my favorite things about each piece in this art are just the flaws. I like that this triangle ended up a little oblong, or I like that this angle isn't quite right. Those angles that aren't quite right are often where the best shadows come in.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I don't know, to wrap up kind of this part of it, I mean, how do you deal with it? I guess in my mind, if I tried to summarize it, I would say, look, you got to know why you're in it.
Yeah.
And if you're in it for some kind of externally defined metric of success, if you're in it for money, if you're in it for fame, if you're in it for being accepted or loved, if you're in it for your parents, if you're in it for your significant other, if you're in it for any of these external reasons, you are probably in for hurt. But if you are in it because what you care about is the journey, uh, then I think then that's the battle right there. Because if you're not worried about the destination, if you're not worried about any of these other things, then you've already succeeded. You're doing what you love. So, anybody who, whether it's Herzog or anybody else, look, such a huge part of their success are so many things that were outside of the purview of their control. Success, I feel like at least in our country here, it's like success. We have this idea that your success is all just the result of what you've done. Bullshit. So much about just right place, right time, luck. That there's talented people all over the goddamn planet who you're never going to hear about because the luck is such a big part of it. Right place, right time, just whatever it is, man. It's just a whole huge barrel of variables. We can't control them all, so you can't get caught up in destination. I think
successes can be like really I think successes can be as unpredictable as failures too. I think one of the successes of Fitzcarraldo is being able to sit and hear Werner talk about Fitzcarraldo. Every time he talks about how he had to make 2 extra boats, and
yeah,
had to, that's a success I don't think anybody saw coming. And the fact that he has had a career so long after that and is able to bring us all together to have this discussion on a Sunday, I think that's a strange success of Fitzcarraldo and Aguirre and a number of other movies that he's made.
yeah,
Nobody saw coming. And,
for sure.
Probably as unexpected as some of his failures,
So yeah, I think we'll have to. I mean, again, we could. Boy, there's just one other quick. Sorry, one other quick little thing too, because this speaks directly to like how do you deal with failure and rejection. Well, also I think how you deal with success is really important. And there's I think a TED talk that maybe Hillary actually posted a while back, but it's really important about what do you attribute your success or failure to. And I think that if you think that the entirety of your success is all about you and what you do and your work, and that then you're also going to attribute any and all failure or mistakes coming from you personally as well. And we used to have this idea that there was a muse and that this muse was kind of outside of us. And so if you were lucky enough to have that muse speak through you in whatever it was, if you were a painter or a writer or an actor or whatever, then you were just like, well, hey, I'm taking dictation. Look, this is coming from somewhere. Some people would say, depending on your religious beliefs or whatever, but it was this muse, right? It was like, hey, I make myself available for the muse, and if he or she speaks through me, wonderful. But strangely, in today's kind of modern culture, we've got to this place where it's all about the individual person. It's like if you're wealthy, that's because everything you did brought you to that place, and no other variables were a part of your success. If you're artistically successful, that's because you're inherently talented, and nothing else outside of you was a result. So you get so tied, right? Then it's personal. Then if you fail, well, then it's because you're right. If you accept the idea that if you're a success and that's all because of you, then you've also got to accept the other side of that, which is that if you're a failure, it's all because of you too.
But nobody likes that. Everybody likes to
no, but, and so I'm saying there's a there's a value, there's a protection to saying, look, there's something outside of me that you can, so that I can kind of blame for both the success and failure. And this might sound weird, and maybe I'm not articulating it very well, but it kind of protects you from failure, to also not get caught up in your success, to just, to realize there are a lot of variables, to realize that none of us are islands unto ourselves, to not take it personally is actually an anxiety reducing, a stress relieving way to look at it. And I feel like you can actually really unlock a lot of creative potential by letting go of this idea that it all just is coming from you and that you are personally responsible for all of it. And I'm not a religious person. I'm not even a spiritual person. I'm not saying supernaturally that stuff comes from somewhere else and goes through you. I'm just saying, hey, let go of this like ego-centric idea that it's all coming from you.
But it's different if it is all coming from you. Like that's another thing too. I don't lately particularly, and I say lately, and I mean like the last like 10 years with a couple of exceptions of a couple of productions, I've made stuff almost solely on my own. You know, like I'm drawing this tarot deck now. That's been 9 years of me drawing alone in a room with no input from anybody. If that art is horrible, it's because I made a horrible piece of art, and it's not because somebody else made a horrible piece of art. Like when I think what you're talking about is important in terms of accountability. You at least being accountable for what you put into it. But like if this tarot deck is a success, like screw y'all. I'm gonna take all the credit for that because pretty much, I mean, I've had a little bit of help here and there, but it's mostly been, I mean, it's been 9 years of ink coming out of my pen from my right or sometimes my left hand, and it's all been from me. So I think it's not, you know, like you trying to saying, you saying that we shouldn't take stuff so on our own shoulders. I think you need to take stuff on your shoulders that should be on your shoulders. That's something that I see a lot of people when they fail, they go, well, that project failed, you know, like that play I was talking about. You know, that was something that happened. I thought it was such an artistic failure and such a personal failure that I assumed also that it was a professional failure. You know, I know we saw the numbers. It was a financial failure. And I said, well, it must be because it was an artistic and personal failure as well. And I wasn't the only person that did that, that made that happen, you know?
Yeah. Well, I guess I would just try to articulate a little bit of a subtlety here, which I may not be conveying, which is that you've got to take, there's a work ethic, there's a showing up that you've got to do, that you've got to take responsibility for. Don't misunderstand. I'm not suggesting that that you don't take responsibility for showing up every day, for putting in the work. That's different. For being a craftsperson, right? A craftsman, craftswoman, to put in the work, to hone your skills, to learn the craft, to learn whatever it is that you're doing. Absolutely, that is on your shoulders. I guess what I'm talking about is beyond that. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
I mean, what else can you control? So I feel like I guess you're going to drive yourself goddamn nuts
Yeah, yeah.
ultimately if you put on, if you just listen. I mean, if I, you know, I don't know, that's but again, yeah, there's a lot of different interesting viewpoints, there's a lot of different ways to that we each kind of handle it, and I think that's part of the conversation, or that, you know, that ultimately each person certainly does have to figure out their own internal philosophy for how they're going to handle this. Because the fact is that rejection and failure are huge parts of any creative life. But
Yes.
now after that, how are you going to deal with it? And we each have to find our own way ultimately. There is no one answer that works for everyone. So yeah. Well, we got to move on a little bit here. So we're about 42 minutes in, and we still have to save some time to discuss Colin's film. So real briefly, let's talk about just real quickly, because we haven't actually talked. So have you ever been at risk of losing faith in a project? And how do you choose to keep believing in it or to move on? Fred, what are your thoughts on those questions?
Yeah.
I feel that we've touched a little bit on some of this,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
9 years
Well,
making these tarot cards, but
I just spent 3 weeks working on my short for the intensive, and yesterday actually I put that thing in the grave, man.
mm,
I aborted that fetus before I could push that out into the world. Like
oh wow.
it is not. Yeah, I was a puddle yesterday. I was a total wimp. You'd have been like,
Oh man.
idiot, sickly. He's a little pussy. Like I was not. I'm still not completely at peace about it, but I
Can I probe a little bit and ask you, so what was that decision process like for you? What can I ask, why did you decide to bury it
it was
and just
okay.
abandon it completely?
It was because I didn't believe in it. Like if I'd have had collaborators, if I'd have had a crew of people, you know, and I did have two collaborators. You know, I had somebody that did an interview for me, but none of that interview footage was something that would have ended up in the final anyway because it was all a dud. I think we talked about that last week. That none of my interview footage was usable either because of my dog or being too
Yeah.
active of a listener or something. So if there had been money involved, I would have finished it and I would have put Alan Smithy on the director credit.
Gotcha.
It was bad enough that I felt like I was losing. I would have lost more. More doors would have been closed to me if I'd have finished it than me saying, "Oh, I give up." You know, like
So I got a question for you. I'm going to interrupt you just a little. Do you feel like it was the idea at its core, or was it the execution of that idea?
it was the execution. I mean, there were some technical problems
Yeah,
that were overcomable, but then we watched a 7 minute clip of it. Me and my wife, we watched this 7 minute clip that I'd gotten together. We watched it 6 times, and so I mean, so we spent some serious time on it.
yeah.
And it was, there were these little technical things that's like, hey, in post you can change that zoom. Why don't you take that zoom out? Why don't you make this cut quicker? Why don't you make the subtitles a little bigger? Why don't you make the music a little quieter? There's a bunch of little technical things that were like, oh, this isn't working. But then, the shots weren't good, the story wasn't there. It was more or less, it was just a boring piece of film that if I'd have finished it, I wouldn't have wanted to show it to you. Like I feel more successful having decided to scrap it. I've all but just the only thing left to do is delete the project and say, hey, it's over. That's good.
Well, let me say a couple things. Alana has in chat has an interesting point here, and I might suggest you think about this. Bad can provide a door for learning. Here in our because this is a class, like we're students. We all admit we're learning in this
Mhm.
master class group. So maybe think about, could this be a teachable moment, or can we learn something from your project? And in that way, it would go from a failure in your eyes to actually a success, in the sense that we can, because none of us make. I mean, look, I haven't done a short film for this, so there's a failure already, right?
Right.
The worst kind of failure is to do nothing. I have not yet made the film for this, so there's a monumental failure in my mind, not having done anything. And then for the assignment 5 film I did is just a big giant steaming turd.
Right.
So, but so I guess, so think about it. I'm just saying, maybe think about
Well, no, I get
still
it.
posting it so we can learn from it. And the other thing I would suggest to you, maybe personally, Fred,
Yeah.
if the core of the idea still speaks to you, well, then expand the scope of the project and say, well, this was just the first step that's taking me to another step where I can refine my technical execution and bring that core idea to fruition. It's not
Yeah,
over, it's just a step.
that was one of the ideas was that this was going to be a test film towards something else, but it doesn't mean I need to finish a failed test
No, I'm saying use it. Don't use the footage. Don't use the audio. But I'm saying whatever propelled you to tell whatever. I've not seen it, so I can't speak specifically. But whatever the core idea was, take that core idea and start over technically,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you've learned, right? You're like, well, I learned there's like a dog barking, or the audio was unusable, or da 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 da. Okay, well, now fix those. They're just technical. Those are just technical issues. Those are not creative issues. They're just technical. Fix the technical stuff, and now move forward. New footage.
But in
It's like
terms
it was like Herzog on Fitzcarraldo, when Jagger and Robards had to bail halfway through the film. He
Yeah,
wasn't like fuck it, fuck it. He was like, I'm starting over. God damn it.
but that's what I would have to do. And for me, like I get what I could do in terms of cutting this together and posting it and be like, this is my intensive final. But I'm not here to teach either. Like I am here to learn, and it would be
Sure.
cool. I feel like it would be a nice like little bit of volunteer work to get everybody else to learn from my mistakes. But I'm also not guaranteed that people would do much more than laugh at
That's true.
them.
Look, there is a
And
fear of that. I
in terms
understand.
of
Yeah.
in terms of learning from those mistakes, I totally have. In terms of me starting this film over and doing it again, that to me is an impossibility and completely out the door. Like the
Okay.
idea I get is kind of there, but like I say, I've learned a lot from it. But in terms of me finishing it toward any ends, total
Oh,
failure. In
okay.
terms of it being like my personal goal with it was that it was going to be my intensive final. That was the only goal in making that film.
Right.
and that is 100% not met at all. Like even if
Okay.
I decided that I think what the problem is, one of them anyway, is that if I was going to decide that I was going to do it, it would mean like 60 to 80 hours of work on something that I'm 100% sure at this point I wouldn't be proud of.
Gotcha.
And that's why I say about money and collaboration. If it was a financial issue or I had other people's asses writing on this, I would have to finish it and say, oh, I didn't direct that because it's such a steaming pile that I don't need my name on it. But I'm not in that position. I'm in a position, and I'm quite frequently in this position. Like I say, I don't collaborate with people very often. Because I don't collaborate, if it's my ass on the line and I don't believe in a piece of art, I say, well, like screw that piece of art. Like why would I make a piece of art that doesn't have anybody else's asses on the line? Why would I even make something that I don't believe in? And at this
Well, for
point,
sure. If you don't believe in it, there's no question. Yeah, if you don't believe in something, and I think that maybe that's the answer to the question here, because the question is how do you know, when do you choose to move on or to stick with it? And I think maybe you just raised a really interesting point, which is that look, if it's no longer speaking to you, if you no longer believe in the idea, or if it's no longer if it's no longer compelling to you, well then shit, yeah,
well,
move
I think
on.
the only reason not to move on, like I said, it's the reason I didn't quit that play I keep referencing too. There were 3 or 4 times when I said, like you guys' faces are lovely, but I don't want to look at them and I'm going to leave. And they said like, dude, we're paying you to be here. And I'm like, oh man, like it's not just my ass on the line, and like they're paying me to be here. They're paying my transportation, which wasn't a cheap thing. And so if there's money and somebody else's reputation, then you have to stand up
That's
for
what
that
you have
other
to be
person.
professional. That's being professional. That's if you're being paid by somebody else and you're under contract and other people are relying on you, then and Herzog talks about this many times during the classes. Look, you have to be a professional. So I think
Hmm.
that's an important point too. If other people are relying on you, if other people are paying you, if you are under contract, then you've got to soldier on. And that's about being professional.
That
That's
was the
about not burning bridges. That's
I
important.
didn't I didn't pay my $90 admission to this class for me to go and make something that I think is complete crap.
Yeah.
It's not like this is a good setting to have that failure probably, because if I was in an actual class where I had to like turn in something toward a grade, then that's not just my reputation, but that's like my that's part of my professional future on the line. That's
Yeah.
not so much a restriction here, and I can
Well,
easily say, hey, screw that film and not finish it.
yeah, you can. And my only hope before we have to kind of move on here time wise is just my hope is just as a fellow student and as somebody in the audience, I hope that you then move to another film to share with us because I'd love to see it. So if this idea no longer speaks to you, I hope that you just start over then and find another one, whether it's the intensive thing or not, or whether it's one of the other assignments. My hope would be that because I'd like to see your work. So that's just on a personal level. I
Thanks.
hope that you find another idea then that speaks to you. All right. So let me just. I'm sorry, guys. I know I've not pulled out a
Yeah.
ton of stuff from chat. Part of it is that Fred and I are both, as you can see, having to shoulder the entirety of the conversation. So there's a lot more talking than would usually occur because there'd be a few other people here to kind of shoulder some of that. And I'm also struggling just to keep all the snot in my head from coming out on camera. So please accept my apologies for not having been so involved in the chat. I am reading everything that you guys say. I'm just not able to call everything out. So I'm just let me see. I've just there's no failing here at Masterclass, and I would just say there's fuck. I mean, I don't even I have redefined what failing means for me in such a way that I think the only failure that I can ever have is to not do anything. If I don't do any work, then it's failure. If I do even the smallest thing, it's a success. And I guess if I set the bar that low for myself, then I'm always succeeding. So that's what I do. Let's see what else. Oh, Alana brings. I'm just going to take a quick moment to have a quick plug. Alana and I. So this is the last week for the intensive live discussions. Alana and I are working we're in the middle of this right now. We are working to put together another hangout that's going to take place next Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So same place, same time. And we're in the process of putting together the topics for that. But it's going to be about kind of, dealing with mistakes, working through perfectionism, and kind of all of the other things that fall in line with that, whether it's procrastination but dealing with how do you go forward with an idea when you're bombarded by ideas, or maybe the converse of that if you have no ideas. So we're going to have another, and Alana and I are going to do this. It's going to be a week from now, 10 a.m. Sunday. That's, of course, it's always Pacific time. And we are coming up on that'll be kind of interesting, because that, I think, is on the day that daylight savings time switches here. So we'll be specific about that. So we're going to be posting information about that on Facebook and everything soon. We'll have a document with all the topics and the agenda, and we'll remind everybody when that's coming up. But hopefully, if you are not sick of seeing my face, at least Alana's face will be there, and there'll be a reason to show up, even if you're sick of seeing mine. All right, okay, so there's all of that.
Let's talk about Cullen's film, right?
Let's talk about Cullen's film. Let's do it. So hopefully everybody in chat, I hope you guys have seen his film, because it's great. I can tell he put a lot of time and effort into it. It's really exciting. We wish he could be here to talk about it with us, but he's not. So we're going to just slander his name all over the place since he's gone.
Right. Let's start with all the bad parts.
Let's start with all the good parts. So we were gonna have Cullen talk about some of his thought processes, how do you choose the story, the actors, the music, kind of discuss his creative process. Hopefully he's not here for some reason now, but hopefully we can still get him to do this, whether that's on the Facebook page, or maybe we can set something up otherwise where he can talk about it. So really the only thing, we can't talk about his creative process because Fred and I weren't a part of that creative process, so we don't have the goddamn idea how he chose the story, the actors, the music, but we can talk about it. We can talk about his film. Yeah. So Fred, tell me what you think. What do you think about Cullen's film for the intensive here?
I think it's well thought out. I think I see a couple of things he's trying to do. I mostly see stuff that he's trying to do that he succeeded at. I wonder what exactly, I wish he was here to talk about it, what he was trying to do that he failed at. I know that I could see a couple of things maybe technically that he probably wishes he'd done better, but I know that he would recognize that those are nitpicky things.
Yeah.
I'd have to say, you mentioned like, oh, we don't know what his process was like, but we do know a couple of things because he's told us a couple of things on Facebook.
Okay.
He showed us this picture of a tripod that was strapped into a passenger seat in a car, and that's how he got his night shots from the car. I thought that was a pretty ingenious little solution. He said, well, I don't have any way of really securing this, but I do have a tripod and I do have a seat belt. It looks like he literally just put a seat belt on a tripod.
Nice.
It looked like it worked really well. And,
yeah. Do you know Fred, any other technicals? Do you know what because there's part of it is just like the technical nitty gritty, and that's kind of logistics of things. Then part of it is kind of, story and these other kind of a little more abstract stuff. Do you know any more do you know what he shot it on? Do you know anything else about that? I don't remember him saying.
There's a picture, that picture with the tripod has a picture of his camera, and I'm not willing to assume, but I would think that it's probably that camera and maybe another camera or two that he used to shoot.
So there is a picture of his rig or what he used to shoot. I can't remember. I must have missed that.
Well, another thing, he posted a couple of stills from post-production that were really just sort of different stages of color correction and color grading and stuff for one of the scenes. And
I remember that. Yeah.
I don't know if he used that across the board, but it looks like the kid had a little bit of tenacity. It looked like he didn't just say, "Hey, this is the color that came out of my camera."
Yeah.
He knew, he had the foresight to look into how the pros do it and kind of make sure that looks like the greens and the reds and the shadows and the highlights were all sort of paid attention to.
Yeah,
I don't think that was something he skimped on. I think he really put some time into that.
certainly. It's clear he did put time into it. And Alana's saying, she liked the shot variety. He put in quite a few nods to the classics. I think several people on Facebook kind of pointed out they felt a little Hitchcockian vibe going on. And that night shots looked great. And Alana was also saying here that so Jason and I were wondering about the water opening, and what she means by that is that in the first minute of the film, there's the title of the film kind of is kind of expanding and coming at you, and in the font there is a shot of this lake.
Yeah, yeah.
And so Alana's, and I heard this on Facebook too. People were like, "Well, it's very beautiful, certainly sets a tone, but didn't seem to have any correlation whatsoever to the actual story itself."
It didn't really, aside from the fact that The Shining and it both had like an axe murderer in them. Like I
Yeah,
felt like that was a nod to The Shining, where he's got it coming in over the water and stuff. I
and
think
yeah,
I think it looked good. Maybe he was also saying that it was across the cities. It wasn't the same city. It was across the lake. But I think that's kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt.
yeah.
I think it's also something about how maybe we're afraid of water, and you should be afraid of your city in the same way. I think that might also be giving him the benefit of the doubt too.
Yeah, I
But
think it, yeah, and I think it's tough. I mean, to short films are look, it's hard to tell a good story. Period. I think it's exceptionally difficult to tell a good story in a short film. Especially if you're kind of sort of trying to follow a three-act structure. And I'm not trying to get way into that. I just mean a beginning, a middle, and an end.
yeah, yeah,
I think it's pretty tough to have anything above kind of a tone poem, and I don't mean above in a greater or less than sense. Let me say this another way: to have something different than kind of a tonal piece, kind of a visual poem, which Alana, for example, did with her short film. I don't know who's seen that, but a
mhm,
totally different vibe, totally different kind of take on the assignment than Cullen's. It's really more of kind of a visual poem. But anyway, so I think Cullen went for, he's trying to tell kind of story with a beginning, a middle, and end, and it's really hard to do that in just a few minutes. It's really tough. Um, I think the other
Do you
issue
remember
with
the
that
runtime?
beginning. I'm sorry.
Do you remember the runtime? Was it like 8 minutes or
Hold
something?
on, I'll pull it. Well, it's and I was going to speak to that. We're also talking about what makes a video successful on YouTube or virally. I've got to go to it. I remember vaguely it being somewhere around 10 minutes long. Hey, can somebody post the link to his video, to Cullen's video in chat real fast, the YouTube link? Can somebody do that for me?
I'll see if I can find it.
Because what I remember is that the intro is almost a minute. That
Yeah.
the oh, I've got it. I've got it up. I've got it up. So I'm scrubbing through it. We've got, so it's a 10-minute and 59 seconds. So let's say it's an 11-minute long in
That's
its
not bad.
entirety on YouTube. Okay,
Mhm.
that's from beginning to end. The opening credits and the Prey
Seven.
logo take 47, 46, 47 seconds. So
I
they
like
take
I
all
like
they
the play. I like the logo a lot. I liked how he incorporated that, and I liked how that worked out. I thought that worked out really well. I think
it's
it felt what he was trying to do, kind of, like that. What is that dude's name? The dude that did Vertigo and stuff. That kind of animated opening, that old school kind of like, like the opening of Vertigo, which is just this. It makes you feel more than it makes you think about it. And I think it's funny that you bring up the lake that's kind of in the background of it. Is like, well, we do remember this, and we wonder how it fits into the story. I think that's
yeah.
something else you got out of Vertigo too. Was some of that stuff didn't have that the opening credits of Vertigo. A lot of that doesn't have anything to do with that story at all. I mean, not in a very direct way that you can cite, this and this and this, these 9 things, the color scheme or anything fits in really well. I think that in a way was a way he set the mood quite well, and also with his end credits. And I felt like his end credits were also kind of had a bit of a nod to maybe Zodiac or something. Scrolling through documents.
Yeah.
Well, and the Donovan song.
Yep. Yeah, well, and I think it's, it's always it's tough. It's like I think that you make really good points that the intro sequence definitely it gets us in a certain state of mind. It definitely sets a tone. Um, on the flip side, you could say 47 seconds of a 10-minute long film is an awful long time to spend on your logo or the title.
A four letter word.
So there's, but this is part of it's certainly part of, in an hour and a half long film, of course, that's nothing. But for YouTube, when most clips are about a minute long in its entirety, when your audience can be tough to grab. Again, there's some pros and some cons. So I agree. I feel weird about talking about Cullen's film without him here too. I hope that we're not, we're not trying to. I don't know. What do you guys think? Should we talk about his film anymore if
Well,
he's
yeah.
not here? It's not that I don't feel like we're tearing it apart or anything. I think we're just kind of. I hope we're critiquing it in a healthy way. What do you
Yeah,
guys think?
I think we are totally. Well, I was gonna say though too. We're talking about this runtime. He's got like an 11-minute runtime. We got Alana in the house here. Hers was about 14 minutes long. There's another of our classmates. I believe his name's Giorgio. He had a 3-minute film. So when you look at that range there, you look at some of the tension and things like that Cullen was trying to. You could see he's really like this film wasn't poorly thought out or underthought. He put
No,
in some.
not at all. It's really okay.
Yeah,
So, and I think Alana's got a great idea. We should probably we're 5 after 11. We did start late, so but we're
that's
gonna go. We're starting to go over now, so we can move from the title sequence and kind of get to the overall. Everybody who's in chat, if you've got some ideas, things that we could talk just real quickly, specifically things that really that stuck with you about the film. And I agree. Yes, we'd love to know about his process, but he's not here, and I can't make him magically appear.
I would
Uh,
I would like to say I liked his coloring a lot. His coloring, the fact that most of it happened in late afternoon or night, and he didn't start off starkly at dead of midnight, and he didn't start off at noon or something. I think the fact that the whole story takes place in night kind of adds to that tension he's building in the first half. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I thought that I was
I wish
certainly. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying, like, I wish he was here to talk about this stuff.
Well, and maybe we could just kind of put a pass on it because it was really supposed to be the bulk of this was really supposed to be about him talking about his process. So we could just pass. I could say this though for sure. I know, having made quite a few short films myself, I guess probably working on about 10 or 12 now for myself, that it's a huge amount of work. It's a huge amount of work to have a film that looks as great as his looks. There's no question. This took a lot of time. It took a lot of effort, and I just give major kudos to Cullen for making such a great quality short film in such a short amount of time, and to have it done on time. I mean, that's that Werner talks about being a professional, bringing a film in on time, under budget. I don't know what Cullen's budget was, but clearly he made it because he wouldn't have completed it had he not been under his own budget. So he brought it in time. He brought it in on budget, and that's huge because at the end of the day, if you don't do that, you're
Yeah, I
not
was
a
gonna.
filmmaker.
We were talking about this before we went live too, about how if he was going to try to do that stuff 30 years ago, he'd have needed a huge crew. He'd have needed to hire a colorist. He would have needed to do a bunch of things that I think technology has kind of filled in some of those blanks. But it doesn't matter if technology fills in some of the blanks and makes stuff easier on us if we don't have the idea and the initiative. Herzog talks about the initiative, and the fact that Cullen didn't need to, send everything off to a film lab and wait for it to come back and hope that he got it exposed right was definitely something that helped him make this film. But he didn't just lean on it. I feel like, right? He didn't just those tools and that technology doesn't just exist. they exist, and Cullen went out and used them and finished the film. You know.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I think we can, I apologize that he's not here to discuss the actual creative process that took place, but hopefully we can have another opportunity where he can do that, whether that's, kind of on Facebook where he kind of breaks that out for us, or maybe we can do another hangout where he's available to answer questions for people that people would have about his short. I'm not sure what happened as to why he's not here, but yeah, and we didn't mean to talk about his film with him not here, or I hope it didn't come off that we were being, discussing it in an unhealthy way or anything. We all think his film is great and are proud of him. And so, yeah. All right. Well, we're 10 after 11, so I think we'll wrap it up. But I just want to thank Fred again for being here with me. Appreciate it. It's always fun to knock these ideas back and forth with you. And everybody in chat, thank you for participating. Like I said, I'm sorry I didn't get to call out more of your great ideas and your kind of comments as we've gone along. But I have read them all, and they are appreciated. And all right, so we're going to sign off. Everybody, have a wonderful rest of your day, your evening, whatever the case may be, wherever you are in the world.
Everybody in the intensive, man. Everybody, remember to finish your film and post that stuff by the 8th. The 8th is the deadline to be able to post it and get a critique from the critic that they've lined up to look at everything. Also, I want to see
point.
So yeah, me and Clark and Alana and everybody wants to see your film. So everybody finish your film so we can watch it.
Everybody finish your film, and if you haven't even started, like myself, start, Clark. And then just one last plug again. So yeah, remember, we're going to have another hangout next week. Even though this is the end of the intensive discussions, we will have another hangout next week at the same time, same place. We will post information on that on Facebook in just a couple days. But yeah, so everybody, break a leg, make films, soldier on, and thanks for being here today, and we'll see you guys next time.
Cool.
All right. Later, guys. Bye.
Later.